The waiter's smirk cut sharper than the steak knife on the table. "You sure you can afford this place, buddy?" he said, loud enough for every head in the restaurant to turn. Malik Thompson sat back, his fork pausing mid-air, the weight of the room's stares heavier than the ribeye on his plate. He'd been here before, not this upscale bistro with its linen napkins and overpriced wine, but this moment, where his skin seemed to invite judgment before he'd even spoken. At 32, Malik was no stranger to the sting of prejudice. But tonight, in this gleaming downtown spot called the Hearth, the insult landed differently. Maybe it was the couple at the next table whispering, or the way the waiter, a wiry man named Greg with a practiced sneer, lingered just long enough to make his point. Malik's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm good, thanks. Just bring the check when you're ready." Greg chuckled, a low, mocking sound, and leaned in closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "Oh, I'll get it. Gotta make sure you don't dine and dash, right?" The words hung in the air like smoke, curling around the nearby tables where diners shifted uncomfortably, some pretending not to hear, others staring openly. Malik's fingers gripped the edge of his chair, his calm demeanor a shield he'd perfected over years of navigating spaces where he was made to feel like an outsider. He wasn't here to cause a scene. He was here for answers. The Hearth wasn't just any restaurant. It was a legacy, a cornerstone of the city's fine dining scene, and, as Malik had recently discovered, a piece of his family's history. 3 weeks ago, a yellowed letter from his late grandmother's attic had upended everything he thought he knew about his roots. The letter, written in her careful script, mentioned a restaurant business she'd helped build with her brother, Marcus, before a falling out tore them apart decades ago. Malik had spent weeks tracking it down, piecing together records and old photos until he landed here, at the Hearth, staring at a menu that listed dishes his grandmother used to make. Tonight wasn't about dinner. It was about reclaiming a truth buried under years of silence. But Greg didn't know that. To him, Malik was just another customer to size up, someone to prod for sport. As Greg sauntered back to the kitchen, tossing a smug glance over his shoulder, Malik's phone buzzed. A text from his cousin, Lena. "You there yet? Find anything?" He typed back quickly, "Here. It's the place. Trouble already." Lena's reply was instant. "Stay cool. We got this." Malik exhaled, leaning back in his chair. Lena was the only one who'd believed his theory about the Hearth, the only one who'd helped him dig through their family's past. She was on her way now, bringing documents they'd found, a deed, some old contracts, and a photo of their great-uncle Marcus standing in front of this very building, its sign freshly painted. The restaurant hummed with the clink of glasses and murmured conversations, but the air around Malik felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. He scanned the room, taking in the polished wood floors, the chandeliers casting warm light, the framed photos on the walls showing the restaurant's history. One caught his eye, a black and white shot of a ribbon-cutting ceremony, a man who looked eerily like his father standing beside a younger version of the current owner, Richard Hargrove. Malik's pulse quickened. He'd seen Hargrove's name on the deed, listed as the sole proprietor after Marcus's name vanished from the records in the late 80s. Something didn't add up. Greg returned, dropping the check with a flourish. "Whenever you're ready, sir," he said, the word "sir" laced with mockery. Malik opened the leather folder, glanced at the total, and slid a credit card inside without flinching. Greg raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting hesitation, but Malik met his gaze evenly. "Run it," he said, his tone calm but firm. Greg hesitated, then snatched the folder and walked off, muttering under his breath. Malik caught the words, "entitled" and "out of place." His hands clenched into fists under the table, but he forced himself to breathe. Not yet, he thought. Not until Lena gets here. The tension in the room was palpable now, like a string pulled taut. A woman at the next table leaned toward her companion, whispering, "Did you hear what he said? So unprofessional." Her companion nodded, shooting a sympathetic glance at Malik, but no one spoke up. That was the thing about moments like this, they were loud in their silence. Everyone waiting for someone else to act. Malik had seen it too many times. The averted eyes, the discomfort masquerading as politeness. He wasn't surprised, but it still stung. Minutes later, Greg was back, his face a mix of confusion and irritation. "Cards declined," he announced, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Malik frowned, pulling out his phone to check his bank app. "That's impossible," he said, scrolling quickly. His account was fine, more than fine. He looked up at Greg, whose smirk had returned, sharper now. "Maybe try another one? Or, cash." Greg's tone was syrupy, but his eyes gleamed with malice. Malik's temper flared, but before he could respond, the restaurant's front door swung open, and Lena strode in, her presence commanding attention. At 28, she was a force tall, with a lawyer's poise and a fighter's fire. She carried a manila folder under one arm, her eyes scanning the room until they locked on Malik. She marched straight to his table, ignoring Greg's attempt to intercept her. "Malik, you okay?" she asked, her voice low but fierce. "I'm fine," Malik said, standing to meet her. "But this guy's got a problem." He nodded toward Greg, who was now hovering, clearly thrown by Lena's arrival. She didn't acknowledge him, instead setting the folder on the table with a deliberate thud. "Show me the check," she said. Malik handed it over, and Lena's eyes narrowed as she scanned it. "This is wrong," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "You added a 20% gratuity without asking. And you ran his card wrong on purpose, didn't you?" Greg's face flushed red. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his voice cracked, betraying him. Lena didn't back down. "Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been harassing my cousin since he walked in. And I'm guessing you don't know who he is, do you?" Her words were sharp, each one landing like a dart. The restaurant was dead silent now, every eye on the trio at the center of the room. Malik felt the weight of the moment shift. This was the turning point he'd been waiting for. He reached into the folder Lena had brought and pulled out a faded photograph, holding it up for Greg to see. It was the same image he'd noticed on the wall, but this one had a handwritten note on the back. "Marcus and Richard, opening day, 1985. "This is my great-uncle," Malik said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of steel. "He built this place, and I'm here to find out why his name's been erased from it." Greg's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The diners around them were no longer pretending not to listen. Some leaned forward, others whispered urgently to their companions. Lena stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You picked the wrong person to mess with tonight," she said, "and you're about to find out why." The air in the hearth seemed to thicken. Every sound amplified: the clatter of a dropped fork, the creak of a chair, the sharp intake of breath from a nearby table. Malik's heart pounded, not with fear but with purpose. He'd come here for the truth, but Greg's taunts had turned this into something bigger. This wasn't just about a deed or a family secret anymore. It was about dignity, about standing up to the kind of casual cruelty that thrived in silence. And Malik was done being silent. He turned to the room, his voice rising just enough to carry. "My family helped build this restaurant," he said, holding up the photo for all to see. My great-uncle Marcus poured his life into it, and Sumionatreed to erase him. I'm here to set that right. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. A few diners nodded, their expressions shifting from curiosity to respect. Others looked away, uncomfortable with the truth now staring them in the face. Greg took a step back, his confidence crumbling. "Two didn't know," he stammered, but Lena cut him off. "You didn't care," she said. "You saw a black man sitting here and decided he didn't belong. That's your mistake." She turned to Malik, her eyes fierce with pride. "Show them the deed." Malik reached into the folder again, pulling out a yellow document with Marcus's signature scrawled at the bottom. He held it up, letting the light catch the faded ink. "This says Marcus Thompson was a co-owner of the Hearth," he said, "and I'm his kin. So maybe you should think twice before you tell me I can't afford to be here." The restaurant erupted in murmurs, the tension breaking into a wave of reactions, some shocked, some approving, others uneasy. Greg's face was ashen now, his hands trembling as he clutched the empty tray. He looked toward the kitchen, as if hoping for rescue, but none came. Instead, a man in a tailored suit emerged from the back. Richard Hargrove himself, the current owner, his face a mask of forced calm. Malik's stomach twisted. This was the man who'd taken over after Marcus disappeared from the records. This was the man who held the answers. Hargrove approached, his eyes flicking from Malik to Lena to the documents on the table. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone smooth but guarded. Lena didn't miss a beat. "What's going on," she said, "is that your waiter's been harassing my cousin, and we've got proof this restaurant belongs to our family. Care to explain why Marcus Thompson's name isn't on the title anymore?" Hargrove's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough. Malik saw it flicker of guilt, the crack in the facade. The room was a powder keg now, every diner hanging on their words, the weight of history and justice pressing down on them all. Malik felt the photograph in his hand, the weight of his great-uncle's legacy, and knew this was only the beginning. Richard Hargrove's presence seemed to suck the air out of the room. The man was a fixture in the city, his name synonymous with the Hearth's success, his face plastered on local magazines as a self-made restaurateur. But now, standing under the chandelier's glow, he looked smaller, his tailored suit no match for the weight of Malik's gaze or the damning documents Lena clutched. The diners, frozen in their seats, waited for his response, their forks hovering, their whispers stilled. Malik's heart thumped steadily, a drumbeat of resolve. He wasn't just facing Hargrove or Greg now, was facing decades of buried truth, and he wasn't backing down. Hargrove cleared his throat, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," he said, his voice smooth as polished glass. "Let's take this to my office, shall we? No need to disrupt everyone's evening." He gestured toward a hallway at the back of the restaurant, but Malik didn't move. Neither did Lena. The offer felt like a trap, a way to sweep this under the rug, away from the prying eyes of the crowd. Malik shook his head. "No," he said, his voice clear and unwavering. "We're doing this here, in front of everyone." A ripple of gasps spread through the room. Hargrove's smile tightened, his eyes darting to the diners, who were now openly staring, some with phones discreetly raised, capturing the moment. Lena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Hargrove, we have a deed signed by Marcus Thompson, dated 1985, listing him as co-owner of the Hearth. Care to explain why his name's been scrubbed from every record since then?" She held up the document, its faded ink a silent accusation. The crowd leaned in, the weight of her words sinking in. Hargrove's composure cracked, just for a moment, his fingers twitching at his sides. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice wavered, betraying a flicker of unease. "Marcus was a partner, sure, but he sold his share years ago. It was all legal. Maybe you should check your facts before making accusations." He turned to the crowd, raising his hands as if appealing to their reason. "Folks, let's not let a misunderstanding ruin your dinner. Everything's fine here. Fine." Lena's voice was a whip, sharp and unyielding. "You call erasing a man's legacy fine? You call your waiter humiliating my cousin fine?" She pointed at Greg, who was now shrinking behind Hargrove, his earlier bravado gone. "This isn't just about a deed, Mr. Hargrove. It's about what your restaurant stands for: prejudice, exclusion, and lies." Her words landed like blows, and the crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of agreement and discomfort. A man at a nearby table nodded slowly, while a woman across the room whispered to her friend, her eyes wide with shock. Malik took a step forward, holding up the photograph again, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "This is my great-uncle Marcus," he said, turning the image so the crowd could see. "He wasn't just a partner. He designed the menu, poured his heart into this place. My grandmother told me stories about how he worked nights to perfect the recipes, how he welcomed everyone through those doors, no matter who they were. But something happened, didn't it, Mr. Hargrove? Something that made him disappear from this place he loved." Hargrove's face darkened, his jaw tightening. "You're digging up ancient history," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Marcus made his choice. He left. That's the end of it." But the words sounded hollow, and the crowd wasn't buying it. A young woman at a corner table stood up, her voice trembling but clear. "That doesn't sound right," she said. "If he was a co-owner, why isn't his name anywhere? Why's it all about you?" A few others nodded, their murmurs growing bolder. Hargrove's eyes flicked to her, then back to Malik, and for the first time he looked cornered. Lena seized the moment, opening the manila folder and pulling out another document, a letter from Marcus to Malik's grandmother, dated 1987. "This is from Marcus," she said, her voice ringing with conviction. "He wrote to his sister saying he was pushed out of the hearth. He didn't sell his share, Mr. Hargrove. He was forced out, wasn't he? You and your lawyers made sure of that." She held up the letter, its creased pages trembling slightly in her hand. "He talks about threats, about pressure to sign papers he didn't understand. You took advantage of him." The restaurant was a cauldron now, the tension boiling over. Hargrove's face flushed red, his hands balling into fists. "That's slander," he snapped, his voice rising. "You have no proof. This is my restaurant, built on my sweat, my vision." He turned to the crowd, his tone pleading now. "You all know me. I've run this place for decades. I'm not the bad guy here." But the crowd wasn't with him anymore. A man in a business suit stood up, his voice calm but firm. "Let's hear them out," he said. "If they've got documents, they deserve to be heard." Others chimed in, their voices overlapping, some calling for the truth, others demanding an explanation. Malik felt a surge of gratitude, a flicker of hope. These strangers, who'd been silent just minutes ago, were starting to see him not as an outsider, but as someone fighting for what was right. Greg, still hovering behind Hargrove, tried to slip away toward the kitchen, but Lena's voice stopped him cold. "Don't move," she said, her eyes locking on him. "You're part of this too. You thought you could humiliate my cousin because of how he looks? You thought you could get away with it?" Greg froze, his face pale, his tray clattering to the floor. The sound echoed, a punctuation mark to the chaos unfolding. Malik took a deep breath, stepping closer to Hargrove. "I didn't come here to fight," he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of his conviction. "I came for the truth. My family deserves that. Marcus deserves that. And you know what happened, don't you? You know why his name's gone. Why his recipes are still on your menu, but he's not." He pointed to the framed photos on the wall, where Marcus's face appeared in only one, half hidden in the background. "You can't erase him completely. Not anymore." Hargrove's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You're making a mistake, kid. You don't know what you're stirring up." But the threat fell flat, drowned out by the growing unrest in the room. A woman near the bar stood up, holding her phone. "I'm posting this," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "People need to know what's going on here." Others nodded, their phones out now, the moment spiraling beyond Hargrove's control. Lena turned to the crowd, her voice rising with purpose. "This isn't just about Malik or Marcus," she said. "It's about what happens when people are pushed out, erased because of who they are. It's about standing up when you see something wrong. You're all witnesses to this. Don't let it stay in this room." Her words were a call to action, and the crowd responded. A few clapped, others murmured in agreement, their faces a mix of shock and resolve. Hargrove, sensing the tide turning, tried one last time to regain control. "Enough!" he shouted, slamming his hand on a nearby table, making the glasses rattle. "This is my restaurant, and I won't let you ruin it with lies." But his outburst only fueled the fire. Malik stepped forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "It's not your restaurant," he said. "It's ours, and we're taking it back." The words hit like a thunderclap. Hargrove staggered back, his face a mask of fury and fear. Greg, still frozen, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The crowd was on its feet now, some cheering, others filming, the room alive with a raw, electric energy. Malik felt the weight of his family's history in his hands, the photograph, the deed, the letter, and knew this was the moment they'd been waiting for. Not just him and Lena, but Marcus, his grandmother, everyone who'd been silenced. Lena pulled out her phone, dialing a number she'd saved weeks ago. "I'm calling our lawyer," she said, loud enough for Hargrove to hear. "We're filing a claim for Marcus's share of this restaurant, and we're going public with everything we've found." She turned to the crowd, her voice steady. "If anyone here wants to help, we'll need witnesses. We'll need your voices." The response was immediate. The woman at the bar stepped forward, holding up her phone. "I've got the whole thing recorded," she said. The man in the suit nodded, pulling out a business card. "I'm a journalist," he said. "I'll make sure this gets out." Others chimed in, offering support, their voices a chorus of solidarity. Malik's chest swelled with something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope, real and tangible, born from the courage of strangers. Hargrove's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He looked at Malik, then Lena, then the crowd, and for the first time he seemed to realize he'd lost. "This isn't over," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. He turned and stormed toward the kitchen, Greg scurrying after him like a shadow. The crowd erupted in applause, not just for Malik and Lena, but for the truth breaking through. Malik turned to Lena, his eyes shining with gratitude. "We did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, squeezing his arm. "We're just getting started," she said. They gathered the documents, the photograph, the letter, and stepped out into the night, the weight of the moment still pulsing through them. The hearth sign glowed above, but it felt different now, not a symbol of exclusion, but a beacon of what they could reclaim. The fight wasn't over. There would be lawyers, headlines, maybe even a courtroom. But Malik knew one thing for certain. Marcus's legacy would no longer be erased. He and Lena would make sure of it, and they wouldn't do it alone. The crowd inside, the strangers who'd spoken up, they were part of this now, part of a bigger story about justice, about standing up, about making things right. What do you think? When does silence become complicity? Where do you stand when the truth demands a voice?